Every parent fears the moment they realize they can't give their child what they need most. For Marcus Wellington, that moment came when his 4-year-old daughter asked why Daddy was always gone. Marcus had everything money could buy: a mansion, successful businesses, respect in the community. But success came with a price that left little room for bedtime stories and scrape-knee kisses. When he met Sarah, a gentle nurse with a heart full of love but empty pockets, he made an offer that would change both their lives forever. He would give her a home, financial security, and a chance at the family she'd always dreamed of. In return, she would give his daughter the one thing he couldn't: a mother's love. But what happens when a business arrangement becomes something neither of them expected? Tell us where you're tuning in from and subscribe for tomorrow's special story episode. The gleaming award sat on Marcus Wellington's mahogany desk like a monument to everything he'd achieved and everything he'd sacrificed. Outstanding entrepreneurial excellence, Marcus Wellington, Wellington Enterprises. The brass plaque caught the afternoon light streaming through his corner office windows, 30 floors above the bustling streets of Atlanta. At 35, Marcus had built an empire from nothing: real estate development, tech investments, sustainable energy projects. His name graced buildings across 3 states, and his net worth had recently crossed into 9 figures. But success, Marcus had learned, was a jealous mistress. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Wellington, the school called again." Emma's still in the office. Marcus glanced at his Rolex, 4:47 p.m. Another late pickup. Another disappointed teacher. Another day his daughter spent waiting in the principal's office, while other children went home to mothers who asked about their day and fathers who helped with homework. "Send the car," he said, already knowing it wasn't enough. It was never enough. 20 minutes later, Marcus watched through his office window as his black Mercedes pulled up to the building below. Emma emerged from the back seat, her small frame dwarfed by her pink backpack, her steps slow and uncertain as she entered the lobby. By the time she reached his office, her bright smile was firmly in place, the brave face she'd learned to wear for Daddy. "Hi, Daddy." Emma launched herself into his arms, her curly hair tickling his chin. She smelled like finger paints and graham crackers, like childhood itself. "Look what I made today!" From her backpack, she produced a drawing that made Marcus's chest tighten. A house, not the sprawling mansion they lived in, but a simple cottage with a red roof and yellow door. 3 stick figures stood in front. A tall one labeled Daddy, a smaller one with curly hair labeled Me, and between them a figure with long brown hair and a wide smile labeled Mama. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," Marcus managed, his voice slightly hoarse. "Tell me about your mama in the picture." Emma's eyes lit up with the earnestness only children possessed. "She makes pancakes and braids my hair and reads me stories every night. She's beautiful and smells like flowers, and she never has to work late." She paused, studying her father's face with wisdom far beyond her 4 years. "When is she coming, Daddy?" The question hung in the air like a prayer Marcus couldn't answer. Emma's mother had died in childbirth, a tragedy that had left Marcus broken and Emma motherless. For 4 years, he'd tried to fill both roles while building his business empire, hiring nannies and housekeepers, but none had lasted. The demanding hours, Emma's attachment issues, his own grief, it had proven too much for everyone who'd tried. "I don't know, baby girl," he whispered, smoothing her curls. "I don't know." That evening, as Marcus sat in Emma's bedroom reading Goodnight Moon for the 100th time, he noticed how she clung to her stuffed elephant, a gift from the last nanny who'd quit after 3 months. Emma's room was a testament to his guilt. Princess beds and toy castles, every doll and book money could buy, but what she wanted most couldn't be purchased. "Daddy," Emma said as he tucked her in. "Jenny at school said her mama kisses her always better." "Who kisses me always when you're at work?" Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. "Mrs. Rodriguez does, remember. She takes good care of you." "But she doesn't smell like flowers," Emma said matter-of-factly, "and she doesn't know the special songs." After Emma fell asleep, Marcus wandered his empty mansion, 5 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, a kitchen that could serve a restaurant, all echoing with the loneliness of a house that wasn't quite a home. He'd bought it as a symbol of his success, but now it felt more like a beautiful prison. His phone buzzed with emails, meetings to reschedule, deals to close, decisions that affected hundreds of employees. The weight of responsibility sat on his shoulders like a familiar burden, but tonight it felt heavier than usual. How could he run multiple companies, but not figure out how to give his daughter what she needed most? 15 miles away, in a small apartment above a bookstore in Virginia Highland, Sarah Chen was having her own moment of reckoning. The eviction notice lay on her kitchen table next to a stack of medical bills, the numbers blurring together through her exhausted tears. 3 months behind on rent, credit cards maxed out, and her mother's funeral expenses still unpaid. At 28, Sarah felt like she was drowning. She'd been a pediatric nurse at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta for 5 years, pouring her heart into caring for other people's children while her own dreams of family remained unfulfilled. After her mother's long battle with cancer, Sarah had exhausted her savings and taken leave to care for her. Now, 3 months after the funeral, she was trying to rebuild a life from the ashes of grief and financial ruin. Her grandmother's recipe book lay open beside the bills, its pages yellowed with age and spotted with decades of love. Sarah traced, her finger over the handwritten notes in the margins. Add extra vanilla for special occasions. Emma loves these with chocolate chips. Made these for Sarah's first day of school. The recipes weren't just instructions, they were love letters, traditions passed down through generations of strong women who'd known how to make a house feel like home. Sarah had always dreamed of having a family, of continuing those traditions with children of her own. But between her career, her mother's illness, and now her financial crisis, those dreams felt further away than ever. At the hospital, she watched families come and go, witnessed the profound love between parents and children, and felt the ache of her own empty apartment. Her phone rang, interrupting her dark thoughts. "Sarah, honey, how are you holding up?" It was Linda, her former supervisor at the hospital. "I'm managing," Sarah lied, closing the eviction notice. "Just taking things one day at a time. Listen, I know you're not ready to come back full-time yet, but I have something that might interest you. It's different from anything we usually handle, but the pay is extraordinary." Sarah sat up straighter. "What kind of position?" "It's a private case. A single father, very wealthy, needs someone to care for his 4-year-old daughter. Live in. Position, full benefits, salary that would solve your financial problems, and then some. The catch is, he's not looking for just a nanny. He wants someone who can be a real mother figure to his little girl." Sarah's heart began to race. "What do you mean, exactly?" "The arrangement is unconventional. He's offering a home, financial security, everything you need to start over. In exchange, you'd become this child's mother in every way that matters. It's a business arrangement, but one that could benefit everyone involved." As Linda continued with the details, Sarah found herself thinking about the children she'd cared for at the hospital. How natural it felt to comfort them, to sing lullabies in the middle of the night, to celebrate small victories and grieve small losses. She'd always had a gift with children, a maternal instinct that had no outlet in her own life. "Would you be interested in meeting them?" Linda asked. "No commitment, just a conversation." Sarah looked around her small apartment, at the bills that threatened her future and the recipe book that represented her past. Maybe, just maybe, this could be her path forward. "Yes," she said quietly. "I'd like to meet them." The next afternoon, Marcus stood in the lobby of Children's Healthcare, feeling out of place among the cheerful murals and tiny chairs. Emma clung to his hand, her quarterly checkup completed, her latest growth chart showing a healthy, thriving child who nonetheless seemed to carry the weight of the world in her dark eyes. "Mr. Wellington?" A woman approached them, her voice gentle and warm. I'm Sarah Chen. Linda mentioned you might be interested in discussing Emma's care. Marcus turned, and for a moment time seemed suspended. Sarah was beautiful, yes, but not in the polished, artificial way of the women in his social circle. Her beauty was natural, unassuming, the kind that came from genuine kindness and inner strength. She wore simple scrubs, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, but when she smiled at Emma, her whole face transformed. "Hi there, sweetie," Sarah said, kneeling to Emma's level. "I love your butterfly dress. Did you pick it out yourself?" Emma, usually shy with strangers, found herself nodding. "Daddy let me choose. It's my favorite because butterflies are magical." "They are magical," Sarah agreed solemnly. "Did you know they start as little caterpillars and then transform into something beautiful? Just like how people can transform, too, when they're loved and cared for properly." Emma's eyes widened with wonder, and Marcus felt something shift in his chest. This woman understood children in a way that went beyond mere professional training. She spoke to them as individuals, with respect and genuine interest. "Mr. Wellington," Sarah said, rising gracefully, "perhaps we could talk while Emma explores the play area." As they settled in a quiet corner, Emma contentedly colouring nearby, Marcus found himself studying Sarah's face. There was something about her presence that felt calming, centered. She didn't fidget or check her phone or seem in any hurry to impress him. "Linda told me about your situation," Sarah said quietly, "and about what you're looking for." "What I'm looking for," Marcus repeated, "is someone who can give my daughter what I can't. A mother's love, a stable presence, the kind of nurturing that money can't buy." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, watching Emma carefully colour within the lines of her butterfly picture. "And what you're offering in return? It's a home, financial security, but not a traditional relationship, no," Marcus said quickly. "This would be a business arrangement, a mutually beneficial contract. You'd have your own space, your own life, but Emma would be your priority, your responsibility." Something flickered in Sarah's eyes, hurt perhaps, or disappointment, but when she spoke, her voice was steady. "And what happens if Emma becomes attached to me?" "Children don't understand business arrangements, Mr. Wellington. To her, I'd simply be her mother," Marcus finished, "which is exactly what I'm hoping for." Sarah turned to watch Emma, who had moved on to a puzzle and was humming softly to herself. "She's a beautiful child. You can see the intelligence in her eyes, but also the longing. She needs more than you can give her while building your empire." The words should have stung, but coming from Sarah, they sounded like simple truth rather than judgment. Marcus found himself telling her about the drawing, about Emma's questions, about the parade of nannies who'd come and gone. "I can provide for her financially," he said. "I can give her every opportunity, every advantage. But what good is any of that if she grows up feeling unloved, feeling like she's not enough to make her own father prioritize her?" Sarah was quiet for a long time, and Marcus began to worry he'd said too much, revealed too much of his own failures. But when she spoke, her voice was gentle. "I understand what it's like to lose a mother," she said. "Mine passed away 3 months ago. And I understand what it's like to want a family more than anything else in the world." She paused, her eyes still on Emma. "I also understand what it's like to love a child who isn't biologically yours, but who becomes yours in every way that matters." Something in her tone made Marcus lean forward. "You have experience with that? My cousin's daughter lived with my mother and me for 2 years while my cousin got her life together. Lucy was about Emma's age when she came to us. Scared, angry, missing her mama, but needing stability. By the time she went back to her mother, she called me Mama Sarah, and Sarah's voice caught slightly. "I loved her like she was my own." "What happened?" "Her mother remarried, moved to California. Lucy needed to be with her real family." Sarah's smile was tinged with old sadness. "It was the right thing, but it nearly broke my heart." Marcus felt a deep recognition in her words. Here was someone who understood loss, who understood the complexity of loving someone else's child, who knew both the joy and the pain of family in all its imperfect forms. "Emma, sweetheart," Sarah called softly, "would you like to show me your puzzle?" Emma bounced over, chattering about the butterfly she'd completed, and Marcus watched as Sarah gave the child her complete attention, asking questions, praising Emma's work, listening as if Emma's words were the most important thing in the world. This was what he couldn't give his daughter, Marcus realized. Not just care or attention, but this quality of presence, this ability to make a child feel valued and heard and loved simply for existing. As they prepared to leave, Emma surprised them both by reaching up to hug Sarah goodbye. "Will I see you again, Miss Sarah?" Sarah glanced at Marcus, a question in her eyes. "Would you like that?" Emma nodded vigorously, and Marcus felt something settle into place inside his chest, a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. "Miss Sarah," Marcus said carefully, "would you be interested in continuing this conversation, perhaps over dinner, where we can discuss the details more thoroughly?" Sarah looked between Marcus and Emma, her expression thoughtful. Finally, she nodded. "I think I'd like that very much." As they walked to their respective cars, Emma skipping between them, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just taken a turn toward something he hadn't dared to hope for. Not love. He wasn't looking for that. But perhaps something more valuable, the possibility of giving his daughter the one thing his success couldn't buy, a real home, a real family, a real chance at happiness. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot, and Marcus found himself thinking that maybe, just maybe, some of life's most important contracts couldn't be negotiated in boardrooms. Maybe they had to be written in trust, sealed with hope, and paid for with the courage to believe that sometimes the most unconventional arrangements could lead to the most extraordinary outcomes. The restaurant Marcus had chosen was elegant, but not ostentatious. The kind of place where serious conversations happened over carefully prepared meals. Sarah arrived 5 minutes early, her hands trembling slightly as she smoothed her simple black dress. She'd spent an hour agonizing over what to wear to a meeting that could change her life, finally settling on something that made her feel confident. But not like she was trying too hard. Marcus was already waiting at a corner table, and he stood as she approached. Without Emma as a buffer, the reality of what they were discussing felt more immediate, more serious. This wasn't just about childcare. This was about reshaping the fundamental structure of two lives. "Thank you for coming," Marcus said, pulling out her chair. The small gesture of courtesy reminded Sarah that despite his wealth and success, he seemed genuinely thoughtful. "I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of ordering wine. I thought we might both need it for this conversation." Sarah managed a small laugh. "Honestly, I've been nervous all day. Emma is wonderful, but what you're proposing, it's not exactly conventional." "No, it's not," Marcus agreed, settling across from her. "Which is why I want to be completely transparent about what I'm offering and what I'm hoping for in return." From his briefcase, he withdrew a leather folder and set it on the table between them. "I've had my lawyers draft a preliminary agreement. Nothing binding, just an outline of the arrangement I have in mind." Sarah stared at the folder as if it might bite her. Inside those pages was a life she'd never imagined, a chance to have the family she'd always wanted, even if it wasn't in the way she'd dreamed it would happen. "Before we look at that," she said, "I need to understand something. What happened to Emma's mother? How did you end up raising her alone?" Marcus's expression grew distant, and Sarah immediately regretted the question. But after a moment, he began to speak. "Elena died during childbirth," he said quietly. "Complications that no one saw coming. One moment I was about to become a father. The next I was a widower, holding a newborn daughter who would never know her mother." He paused, his fingers tracing the rim of his wine glass. "I was so focused on building my business then, working 18-hour days, convinced that success would give us the perfect life. Instead, it cost me the woman I loved and left me completely unprepared to raise a child alone." Sarah felt her chest tighten with sympathy. "I'm so sorry. That must have been devastating." "It was," Marcus admitted. "For the first year, I barely functioned. Thank God for Elena's sister, Maria, who came to help with Emma. But Maria has her own family in California, and she couldn't stay indefinitely. Since then, it's been a parade of nannies and housekeepers, none of whom Emma really connected with. And now, you think you've found someone she can connect with?" Marcus met her eyes directly. "I saw how she responded to you yesterday. In 10 minutes, you gave her something I've been trying to provide for 4 years. The feeling that she's genuinely seen and valued. That's not something you can teach or buy. Either you have it or you don't." Sarah felt a warm glow at his words, but also a stab of uncertainty. "But what you're offering, it's not adoption, it's not marriage, it's a partnership," Marcus said firmly. "A business arrangement that benefits everyone involved. You get financial security, a beautiful home, the chance to raise a child who clearly needs you. Emma gets the mother figure she's been craving. And I get the peace of mind that comes from knowing my daughter is loved and cared for by someone who genuinely wants to be there." He opened the folder and slid several documents across to her. "The base salary is $200,000 annually, plus full benefits, housing, and a discretionary fund for Emma's needs and activities. After 5 years, if the arrangement is working well, there's a substantial bonus that would essentially set you up for life." Sarah's breath caught as she read the numbers. It was more money than she'd ever imagined having, enough to pay off her mother's medical debts and never worry about financial security again. But something in the clinical language of the contract made her stomach turn. "What about personal relationships?" she asked, scanning the pages. "What if I want to date, get married, have children of my own?" "The contract includes provisions for that," Marcus said, though something in his tone suggested discomfort with the topic. "Obviously, anyone you become seriously involved with would need to understand the arrangement and be comfortable with Emma being your priority. As for children—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "We'd cross that bridge when we come to it." Sarah set the papers down, her mind reeling. "Mr. Wellington, I need you to help me understand something. You're offering me what amounts to a fortune to love your daughter, but what if that love doesn't happen naturally? What if Emma and I don't connect the way you hope? What if this whole arrangement becomes a disaster?" "It won't," Marcus said with quiet certainty. "I've watched you with her, Sarah. You don't see a job opportunity when you look at Emma. You see a child who needs nurturing. That's not something you can fake." "But children are perceptive," Sarah pressed. "Eventually Emma will understand that I'm not her biological mother, that I'm here because you hired me. How do we explain that to her in a way that doesn't make her feel like she's a burden or an obligation?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Sarah could see him wrestling with questions he hadn't fully considered. Finally, he spoke. "We tell her the truth," he said. "That sometimes families are created in unexpected ways, that love isn't just about biology, it's about choice, commitment, showing up every day because you want to be there. That her father loved her so much, he searched until he found someone who could love her the way she deserves." Despite her reservations, Sarah felt something stir in her chest at his words. She thought about her mother's patient bracelet, still, in her jewelry box at home. A reminder of how healing could happen when someone dedicated their life to caring for others. "Can I ask you something personal?" Sarah said. "Of course. What's in this for you, really? I understand wanting Emma to be happy, but this arrangement, it's a huge financial commitment, and you're essentially bringing a stranger into your home. Why not just find a girlfriend, get married the traditional way?" Marcus's laugh was bitter. "You think I haven't tried that? Do you know how many women I've dated who were more interested in my bank account than my daughter? Who saw Emma as an obstacle to overcome rather than a child to love?" He shook his head. "At least this way, everything's honest. There are no false expectations, no pretense. You'd be there for Emma, not for me, and that's exactly what she needs." Sarah felt a pang of sadness at the resignation in his voice. Here, was a man who had everything money could buy, but who'd clearly given up on finding genuine love and partnership. The arrangement he was proposing protected him from emotional risk while giving Emma what she needed, but it also felt like a kind of prison for all of them. "I need time to think about this," Sarah said finally. "It's a huge decision, and I want to be sure I'm doing it for the right reasons." "Of course. Take all the time you need." Marcus signaled for the check. "But Sarah, before you decide, I want you to know something. This isn't charity. You wouldn't be doing me a favor. You'd be saving my daughter's childhood, maybe even her future. That's worth more to me than any amount of money." As they walked out of the restaurant together, Sarah clutched her purse, feeling the weight of the eviction notice folded inside. She had 3 days to come up with rent money she didn't have, and this man was offering her a solution to every financial problem she'd ever faced. But was it worth it? Could she really enter into a business arrangement to love someone else's, a child? And what would happen to her own dreams of finding love, having a family of her own? "Sarah," Marcus said as they reached their cars, "there's one more thing. Tomorrow is Saturday. Would you consider spending the day with Emma and me? Nothing formal, just let yourself see what this could look like. See how you feel when you're with her for more than an hour." Sarah looked at this man who was offering her everything she needed and asking for the one thing she'd always wanted to give, a mother's love to a child who needed it. The rational part of her mind screamed that this was crazy, that business, arrangements and genuine affection were incompatible. But the part of her that had ached with emptiness since losing her mother, that had grieved for the family she'd never had, whispered that maybe this was exactly what she'd been looking for all along. "Okay," she said softly. "One day, let me see how this feels." Marcus's smile was the first truly happy expression she'd seen from him. "Thank you, Sarah. I promise you won't regret this." As she drove home to her tiny apartment, the contract documents on her passenger seat, Sarah thought about Emma's drawing. 3 stick figures representing the family a 4-year-old girl dreamed of having. Maybe families weren't just about biology or romance or fairy tale beginnings. Maybe sometimes they were about people who needed each other, finding a way to build something beautiful together. The question was, did she have the courage to find out? Her phone rang as she pulled into her parking space. Linda's voice was warm with curiosity. "How did it go?" "I don't know," Sarah said honestly. "He's offering me everything I've ever needed, but I'm terrified that I'll fall in love with that little girl and this whole thing will fall apart. Or worse, that I'll fall in love with the idea of being her mother and forget that this is just a job." "Sarah, honey," Linda said gently, "what if you're looking at this all wrong? What if this isn't about settling for less than love, but about finding love in a different form than you expected?" After they hung up, Sarah sat in her car, looking up at the windows of her apartment, where the eviction notice waited on her table. Tomorrow, she would spend a day pretending to be part of a family. Tomorrow, she would find out if the most important decision of her life felt like a compromise or like coming home. Either way, her life was about to change forever. The key was heavier than Sarah had expected. A small, golden thing that felt warm against her palm. It was Emma's bedroom key, Marcus explained, as they stood in the grand foyer of his mansion. But it was also something more, a symbol of the trust he was placing in her hands. "Emma insisted you should have your own key to her room," Marcus said, watching his daughter bounce excitedly beside them. "She said that's what mamas do. They can come in any time to check for monsters or give extra kisses." Sarah knelt to Emma's level, holding the key between them like a sacred promise. "Are you sure you want me to have this? This is your special space." "Yes," Emma said, her eyes bright with the certainty that only children possessed. "Because you're going to be my mama now, and mamas need to be able to get in everywhere." She paused, suddenly serious. "Will you really live here forever and ever?" The question hung in the air, and Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling around her like a warm but heavy blanket. She glanced at Marcus, who was watching the exchange, with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I'm going to live here for a very long time," Sarah said carefully, "and take very good care of you while I'm here." It had been a week since that Saturday they'd spent together, a day that had convinced Sarah that this arrangement could work. They'd gone to the zoo, where Emma had chattered non-stop about the butterflies in the greenhouse, then to lunch at a family restaurant where Emma had insisted Sarah sit next to her instead of across the table. By the end of the day, when Emma had fallen asleep in the car with her small hand clasped in Sarah's, the decision had felt inevitable. Now, standing in the marble entryway of Marcus's Buckhead mansion with her few belongings already moved into the guest wing, Sarah was struck by the enormity of what she'd agreed to. The house was beautiful, all clean lines and expensive furnishings, but it felt more like a museum than a home. "Let me show you around properly," Marcus said, leading them through rooms that looked like they belonged in an architectural magazine. The living room with its white leather sofas and glass coffee tables, the dining room with a table that could seat 14, the kitchen with granite countertops and appliances Sarah had only seen in cooking shows. Everything was perfect, expensive, and somehow cold. "Do you like it?" Emma asked, slipping her hand into Sarah's as they toured the house. "Daddy bought it when I was little because he said I needed room to grow." Sarah squeezed Emma's hand gently. "It's very beautiful, sweetheart. I bet you have lots of space to play." "Sometimes it's too big," Emma confided in a whisper that Marcus pretended not to hear. "When Daddy has to work late, the house gets very quiet. Mrs. Rodriguez doesn't like when I make noise." Sarah made a mental note about Mrs. Rodriguez, the housekeeper who'd been maintaining the sterile perfection of this place. That would need to change. Children needed to make noise, to leave their mark on their environment. Marcus showed her to her suite in the East Wing, a bedroom, sitting, room and private bathroom that was larger than her entire apartment had been. "I wanted you to have your privacy," he explained. "This space is completely yours. There's a separate entrance if you want to come and go independently." "Thank you," Sarah said, though something about the arrangement felt strange. The careful separation, the emphasis on independence. It reinforced that this was a business relationship, not a real family dynamic. "And this is Emma's room," Marcus said, producing a matching golden key as they walked down the hallway. Emma's bedroom was the first space in the house that felt lived in, toys scattered on the floor, books spilling from shelves, drawings taped to the walls. Above the bed hung a mobile of butterflies that caught the afternoon light and cast dancing shadows across the ceiling. "I picked the butterflies," Emma announced proudly, "because they're magic, remember? They change into something beautiful, just like you're changing into a big girl," Sarah said, settling on the edge of Emma's bed. The comforter was pink and purple, clearly chosen by a 4-year-old, and it was the first thing in the house that made Sarah smile genuinely. "Can we read a story?" Emma asked, climbing up beside her. "Daddy reads good, but he doesn't do the voices like I think they should sound." Marcus lingered in the doorway, and Sarah could see something complicated in his expression, gratitude mixed with what might have been envy. "I should let you two get acquainted," he said. "I have some calls to make anyway." After he left, Sarah spent an hour reading to Emma, doing different voices for all the characters, and making the little girl giggle with delight. It felt natural, comfortable, as if she'd been doing this for years rather than minutes. "Sarah," Emma said as they finished the second book, "are you really going to stay forever?" The question was the same one Emma had asked earlier, but now there was something vulnerable in her voice that made Sarah's chest tighten. How many people had come and gone from this child's life? How many promises had been broken? "I'm going to stay for a very long time," Sarah said, smoothing Emma's curls. "I promise I won't leave unless something very, very important happens, and even then I would make sure you understood why and that you'd be okay." Emma studied her face with the intensity of a child who'd learned not to trust easily. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, but can I show you something secret first?" She led Sarah to her closet and pushed aside a row of dresses to reveal a small shrine of sorts, photographs of a woman with Emma's dark eyes and Marcus's elegant bone structure, along with a few pieces of jewelry and a letter in a child's careful handwriting. "That's my first mama," Emma said matter-of-factly. "She's in heaven now, but I talk to her sometimes. I wrote her a letter about you." Sarah's throat tightened as she read the letter. Crayon on construction paper, with backwards letters and phonetic spelling. "Dear Mama in heaven, Daddy found me a new mama. Her name is Sarah, and she's very nice. I hope you're not sad. Love, Emma." "Did you tell her about me?" Sarah asked, kneeling beside Emma in the closet. "Yes. I told her you smell like flowers, and you're going to take care of me. I think she's happy because the butterflies came to my window this morning, and Daddy says that means she's watching over me." Sarah felt tears threatening and blinked them back. This child had already lost one mother. The weight of that trust, that hope, was almost overwhelming. "Your first mama will always be special," Sarah said carefully. "I'm not trying to replace her. I'm just here to love you and take care of you now, because that's what she would want." Emma nodded solemnly, then brightened. "Can we make cookies? My first mama's recipe is in the kitchen, but Mrs. Rodriguez says it makes too much mess." "We can absolutely make cookies," Sarah said, "and we can make as much mess as we want." That evening, after Emma had gone to bed with chocolate chip crumbs still on her pajamas and flour in her hair, Sarah found Marcus in his study, working at his laptop. The rest of the house was quiet, and for a moment she could imagine this was what normal families did. Children safely tucked in, parents winding down from the day. "How was your first day?" Marcus asked, looking up from his computer. "Good," Sarah said, settling in the chair across from his desk. "Emma showed me her first mother's pictures. I hope that's okay. I told her it was important to remember her." Something shifted in Marcus's expression. "Elena would have liked you," he said quietly. "She always said Emma needed someone who understood that being a mother isn't just about biology. It's about showing up, being present, choosing to love someone every single day. Is that what she was like?" "Elena was—" Marcus paused, searching for words. "She was warm, intuitive. She could calm Emma with just her voice, even as a baby. She used to say that motherhood was the most natural thing in the world for her." He looked away. "I've always wondered if Emma remembers her at all, or if it's just the stories I've told her." "Children remember more than we think they do," Sarah said gently. "Maybe not specific memories, but the feeling of being loved. Emma carries that with her. You can see it in how she trusts, how she hopes for good things." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Thank you," he said finally, "for today, for all of it. I haven't seen Emma that happy in a very long time." As Sarah made her way to her own room that night, she passed Emma's door and heard the soft sound of a child talking to herself. She pressed her ear to the door and caught fragments. "And Sarah made cookies with me, and she didn't mind the mess, and she said she's going to stay for a very long time." Emma was talking to her. Mother's picture, Sarah realized, sharing the day's happiness with the woman who would always be her first love. Sarah's hand tightened around the golden key Marcus had given her, the key that represented not just access to Emma's room, but access to her heart, her trust, her future. The responsibility felt huge, but for the first time since she'd signed the contract, it also felt right. Maybe this arrangement wasn't conventional, but perhaps the best families rarely were. Perhaps love, real love, was less about perfect circumstances and more about people choosing each other day after day, regardless of how they'd found each other in the first place. Tomorrow, she would wake up in this grand house and help a little girl get ready for school. Tomorrow, she would begin the work of turning a business arrangement into something that felt like home. And maybe, if she was very careful and very lucky, she would begin to heal the parts of herself that had been broken by loss while helping. To heal a little girl who deserved all the love in the world. The recipe book lay open on the kitchen counter like a bridge between worlds. Its yellowed pages, a stark contrast to the sleek granite and stainless steel surrounding it. Sarah traced her grandmother's faded handwriting with her fingertip, reading the notes that turned simple ingredient lists into love letters. Double the vanilla when someone needs extra sweetness, and these always made Sarah smile on sad days. "What's that?" Emma asked, climbing onto the bar stool beside her. It was their third week together, and Emma had developed the habit of appearing wherever Sarah was, as if afraid she might disappear if left unwatched. "This was my grandmother's cookbook," Sarah explained, turning the page to reveal a recipe for pancakes surrounded by decades of notations. "She gave it to my mama, and my mama gave it to me. Every recipe has stories in it." Emma's eyes widened. "What kind of stories?" "Well, this pancake recipe, my grandmother wrote here that she made these every Sunday after church, and that the secret ingredient was singing while you mixed the batter." Sarah smiled at the memory. "My mama used to sing old gospel songs, and I would stand on a chair next to her and try to harmonize. Can we make them?" Emma asked eagerly. "With singing." Sarah glanced at the clock, 6:30 a.m., and Marcus wouldn't be down for breakfast for another hour. Mrs. Rodriguez wouldn't arrive until 8, which meant they had the kitchen to themselves. "Perfect. Let's do it," Sarah said, already reaching for the flour. "But first you have to put on the special apron." From her moving boxes, Sarah produced a small floral apron that had belonged to her mother. She'd brought it hoping to find use for it again, and watching Emma's face light up as she tied it around her small waist felt like a benediction. As they measured and mixed, Sarah taught Emma the song her own mother had sung, "His eye is on the sparrow," and the kitchen filled with their voices, slightly off-key but full of joy. Emma giggled when Sarah let her crack the eggs, even though half the shell ended up in the bowl, and she took her job as official taste tester very seriously. "These are the best pancakes ever," Emma declared, syrup dripping down her chin as they sat at the breakfast counter. "Can we have them every Sunday?" "Every Sunday," Sarah promised, and something settled in her chest at the ease of the commitment. This was what family felt like. Not the formal dinners in the dining room, but sticky fingers and shared songs and the simple pleasure of making something delicious together. Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway just as Sarah was teaching Emma how to flip pancakes, both of them laughing as one went flying across the pan and landed half on the counter. "Good morning," he said, and Sarah caught something in his voice, surprise maybe, or wistfulness. "Daddy, look what me and Sarah made." Emma held up a slightly lopsided pancake with pride, and we sang while we did it, just like Sarah's mama used to do. Marcus accepted the pancake Emma offered him, taking a bite with appropriate ceremony. "This is delicious, baby girl. What's the special ingredient?" "Love songs," Emma said seriously. "Sarah says all the best food has music in it." Over Emma's head, Marcus caught Sarah's eye, and she saw something there that made her stomach flutter. Gratitude, yes, but something deeper. For a moment, he looked like a man remembering what it felt like to be part of something warm and real. "Save me some for when I get back tonight," Marcus asked, ruffling Emma's hair. "You're leaving already?" Emma's face fell slightly. "But it's still morning." "I know, sweetheart. Important meeting in Birmingham. But I'll be back for dinner, and maybe Sarah will let us have pancakes for dessert." After Marcus left, Sarah and Emma settled into the rhythm that had been developing. Over the past weeks, breakfast cleanup became a game, with Emma responsible for putting away anything she could reach, while Sarah handled the dishes. Then it was time to get ready for pre-K, a process that had evolved from battles over clothes to collaborative decisions about which dress would be perfect for Tuesday. "Sarah," Emma said as Sarah brushed her hair, "Jenny at school says her mama picks out all her clothes, but I like picking my own." "Your daddy told me you have very good taste," Sarah replied, securing Emma's curls with a butterfly clip. Besides, part of growing up is learning to make your own choices about things that matter to you. Will you teach me to braid like yours? Emma asked, touching the simple braid hanging over Sarah's shoulder. When your hair gets a little longer, absolutely. The drive to school had become one of Sarah's favorite parts of the day. Emma was a chatterbox in the car, sharing elaborate stories about her dreams or detailed observations about everything they passed. Today, she was particularly excited about show and tell. I'm going to tell everyone about our Sunday pancakes, Emma announced, and about how you have a magic cookbook with stories in it. That sounds perfect, Sarah said, though she felt a small twist of anxiety. How did the other parents view this arrangement? Did Emma's teacher know that Sarah wasn't her biological mother, wasn't even married to her father? At pickup time, Sarah's concerns proved warranted. Standing with the other mothers outside Emma's classroom, she felt the weight of curious stares and whispered conversations that stopped when she approached. You must be Emma's, one mother started, then paused, clearly unsure how to finish the sentence. I'm Sarah, she said simply. I take care of Emma. Oh, you're the nanny, another mother said with visible relief at having a category to place her in. Emma talks about you all the time. She seems very attached. Something in the woman's tone suggested this wasn't entirely a compliment, and Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. Before she could respond, Emma burst out of the classroom and launched herself into Sarah's arms. Sarah, guess what? Mrs. Patterson says I can bring the recipe book for show and tell tomorrow if you say it's okay. Of course it's okay, Sarah said, holding Emma close and trying to ignore the pointed looks from the other mothers. We'll pick out a special recipe to share. On the drive home, Emma chatted about her day, oblivious to the social dynamics Sarah had navigated at pickup. But that evening, as Sarah helped Emma with her bath, the little girl's questions showed she was more perceptive than Sarah had realized. Sarah, what's a nanny? Sarah's hands stilled in Emma's hair. Why do you ask, sweetheart? Because Jenny's mama said you were Daddy's nanny. But Jenny says nannies are for babies, and I'm not a baby. Sarah considered her words carefully. Some grown-ups use different words for the same thing. What matters is that I'm here to take care of you and love you. What do you call me? Emma thought for a moment. You're my Sarah mama, she said decisively. That's different from a nanny. Sarah mama, Sarah repeated, testing the words. I like that. Later that night, as Sarah sat in her room updating a journal she'd started keeping about Emma's development, she heard footsteps in the hallway. A soft knock at her door revealed Marcus, still in his business suit, but with his tie loosened and looking tired. I hope I'm not disturbing you, he said. I wanted to thank you for today. Emma told me about the pancakes, about the recipes, about show and tell tomorrow. It's nothing special, Sarah said, though his gratitude warmed her. Just normal family things. That's exactly what makes it special, Marcus said quietly. Emma's never had normal family things. Neither have I, really. My own childhood was, well, my parents weren't exactly the Sunday morning pancake type. Sarah invited him to sit in the small seating area of her suite, and for a few minutes they talked about their respective childhoods. Marcus's had been privileged but cold, full of achievements and expectations, but short on warmth. Sarah's had been modest but rich in traditions and love. I want Emma to have what you had, Marcus said. That sense of belonging, of being cherished just for existing. I can provide opportunities and advantages, but I can't give her, he gestured vaguely, whatever it is that makes a house feel like home. It's not magic, Sarah said gently. It's just consistency, attention, making a child feel like their happiness matters to you. You make it look effortless, Sarah laughed softly. Trust me, I'm learning as I go, but Emma makes it easy. She's such a loving, open little girl. You did that, Marcus. Whatever mistakes you think you've made, you raised a child who knows how to love and trust and hope for good things. Something shifted in Marcus's expression, and for a moment Sarah saw past the successful businessman to the man underneath, someone who'd been carrying guilt and uncertainty for 4 years, trying to be everything to a child who needed more than any one person could provide. "Thank you," he said simply, "for seeing her that way, for seeing me that way." After he left, Sarah sat in her window seat, looking out over the perfectly manicured grounds. 3 weeks ago, she'd been facing eviction and bankruptcy. Now, she was living in a mansion, caring for a child who called her Sarah Mama, and having late-night conversations with a man who was beginning to feel less like an employer and more like— She cut off that line of thinking. This was a business arrangement, she reminded herself, a beneficial one for everyone involved, but temporary nonetheless. She couldn't afford to forget that, no matter how much this was starting to feel like the family she'd always dreamed of having. But as she prepared for bed, Sarah caught herself humming "His Eye is on the Sparrow" and planning Sunday's pancake. Variations, and she realized that some boundaries were easier to define on paper than they were to maintain in real life, especially when a 4-year-old girl trusted you with her whole heart, and her father was beginning to look at you like you'd brought light into places he'd forgotten could be illuminated. The construction paper was covered in glitter, crayon marks, and what appeared to be dried glue. But to Marcus, it looked like the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Emma's My Family project lay spread across his desk, a riot of color and childhood creativity that made his throat tight with emotion. 3 figures dominated the center of the poster. A tall one in a business suit labeled "My Daddy. He builds buildings and loves me very much." A smaller one with curly hair and a huge smile labeled "Me. I am 4 and I love butterflies and pancakes." And between them, a figure with long brown hair and arms that seemed to embrace both other figures, labeled "My Sarah Mama. She takes care of me and makes everything better." Around the edges, Emma had drawn their house, stick-figure pets they didn't have, and what looked like a garden full of flowers. At the bottom, in her careful preschool handwriting, she'd written, "My family is the best because we love each other." Every day. Marcus had been staring at it for 10 minutes when Sarah knocked on his study door. "Emma wanted to make sure you saw it before she takes it to school tomorrow," Sarah said, settling into the chair across from his desk. "She's very proud of it." "She should be," Marcus managed, his voice slightly hoarse. "She included you as her Sarah Mama, yes. I hope that's okay. I tried to explain that some families look different than others, that there are different kinds of mothers, but—" "It's more than okay," Marcus interrupted. "It's perfect. It's honest." He looked at Sarah, really looked at her, and felt something shift in his chest. "You are her mother, Sarah. Biology doesn't change that." Sarah's cheeks flushed slightly, and she looked down at her hands. "Her teacher wants to display it during the family project's showcase next week. All the parents are invited." "We'll be there," Marcus said without thinking, then caught himself. "I mean, I'll be there unless you'd prefer to go alone." "Actually," Sarah said carefully, "I was hoping we could go together. Emma specifically asked if her whole family could come see her project. She's so excited about it, and I think—" She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "I think it would mean everything to her to have both of us there." Marcus felt a warmth spread through him at the word family. When had he stopped thinking of himself as a single father with an employee and started thinking of them as a unit? "Of course we'll go together." The showcase was held on a Thursday evening in Emma's classroom, transformed for the occasion with tiny chairs arranged in a circle and children's artwork displayed on every surface. Marcus arrived directly from the office, still in his suit, to find Sarah and Emma already there. Emma wore her favorite butterfly dress and had convinced Sarah to braid her hair with ribbons that matched. "Daddy!" Emma launched herself into his arms with her usual enthusiasm. "Come see where my project is. It's right by the window so everyone can see how pretty it is." As they made their way through the crowded classroom, Marcus became aware of the attention they were drawing. Other parents watched them with curiosity, some with barely concealed judgment. He heard whispered fragments of conversation. "That's the arrangement I was telling you about," and "heard he's paying her to—" and not exactly conventional. Sarah's posture stiffened beside him, and Marcus realized she was hearing it too. But before he could say anything, Emma was tugging them toward her display, chattering with pure joy about every detail of her project. "And this is our house," Emma explained to a group of parents and children who'd gathered around. "And these are my two parents who love me very much. And this is my garden where Sarah Mama is going to teach me to grow flowers." "Sarah Mama?" asked one of the other mothers, her voice carefully neutral. "That's an interesting name." "She's my second mama," Emma said matter-of-factly. "My first mama is in heaven, but Sarah Mama takes care of me now and makes the best pancakes and sings songs when she cooks." Marcus watched Sarah's face as Emma spoke, saw the mix of pride and vulnerability there. This child's simple, honest love was the most natural thing in the world to Emma, but Marcus could see how it might look to others. Complicated, unconventional, potentially temporary. "How lovely," the other mother said, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. "And Sarah, She's Emma's mother," Marcus interrupted, his voice calm but firm. "In every way that matters." The conversation moved on, but Marcus noticed how some of the other parents kept glancing their way, how certain mothers made sure to engage Sarah in superficial chat, while clearly probing for details about their arrangement. Sarah handled it with grace, deflecting personal questions while focusing on Emma's achievements and happiness. It was during the refreshment period that Marcus overheard the conversation that made his jaw clench with anger. "I just think it's strange," one mother was saying to a small group gathered by the punch bowl. "I mean, what kind of woman accepts money to play house with someone else's child? And what kind of father thinks love can be bought? It's not like..." "She adopted her," another added. "She's essentially a very well-paid babysitter. What happens when the novelty wears off?" "That poor child is going to be devastated when this whole arrangement falls apart," a third voice chimed in. "Children need stability, not temporary caregivers who might leave the moment they find something better." Marcus started toward them, but Sarah's hand on his arm stopped him. She'd heard too, he realized, and her face was carefully composed but pale. "Don't," she said quietly. "It will only make things worse for Emma." But Emma, in the way of children, had picked up on the shift in atmosphere. She appeared at Sarah's side, slipping her small hand into Sarah's larger one with protective instinct that broke Marcus's heart. "Are you okay, Sarah Mama?" Emma asked, her voice small. "I'm perfect, sweetheart," Sarah said, kneeling to Emma's level and managing a genuine smile. "Are you ready to show Daddy your art corner?" As they moved away from the gossiping parents, Marcus felt a surge of protective anger on behalf of both. Sarah and Emma. These people didn't know anything about their life, about the love he saw every day between Sarah and his daughter, about the way Emma had blossomed under Sarah's care. The drive home was quiet, Emma exhausted and dozing in her car seat, Sarah staring out the window with an expression Marcus couldn't. "Red, Sarah," he began once they'd gotten Emma to bed. "I know what you're going to say," Sarah interrupted, settling onto the living room couch with visible weariness. "That their opinions don't matter, that we know the truth of our situation." "Yes, exactly that. But they're not entirely wrong." "Are they?" Sarah looked at him with eyes that seemed older than they had that morning. "I am being paid to care for Emma. This is temporary, even if we don't want to think about it that way. And if something happened, if you decided this wasn't working, if I met someone and wanted to get married, if any number of things changed, Emma would be devastated." Marcus sat beside her, choosing his words carefully. "Sarah, in the 2 months you've been here, Emma has changed completely. She's confident, happy, secure. She talks about the future like it's something to look forward to instead of something to fear. You did that. We did that," Sarah corrected. "You're a wonderful father, Marcus. You just needed..." "I needed help," Marcus admitted. "I needed someone who could love her the way she deserves. And you don't just love her, you've made this house feel like a home for the first time since Elena died." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was soft. What happens when this stops being enough for me? When I want— She stopped herself, shaking her head. When you want what? Marcus asked gently. A real family. A husband who loves me, not just appreciates what I do for his child, children of my own. The words came out in a rush, as if she'd been holding them back for weeks. I'm 28 years old, Marcus. This arrangement gives me financial security and a child to love, but it doesn't give me a future. Marcus felt something crack in his chest at her words, though he couldn't say exactly what it was. You could have those things, he said carefully. It was. You could have those things, he said carefully. The contract doesn't prevent you from having a personal life, doesn't it? Sarah met his eyes directly. What man wants to compete with a 4-year-old girl who will always be my first priority? What man wants to marry into an arrangement where I'm contractually obligated to another family? The questions hung in the air between them, unanswerable and heavy with implications. Marcus found himself thinking about the way Sarah laughed at Emma's silly jokes, the way she sang while making dinner, the way his house had become warm and welcoming since she'd arrived. He thought about coming home to the sound of voices in the kitchen, to Emma's excited chatter about her day with Sarah, to the sense that his life had color and texture it had been missing for years. What would happen when Sarah decided she wanted more than this arrangement could give her? When she met someone who could offer her the traditional family she deserved? I don't have answers to those questions, Marcus said finally, but I know that Emma loves you. And you love her. Isn't that enough for now? Sarah smiled sadly. For now, she agreed, but someday we're going to have to figure out what happens next. And when that day comes, I'm terrified that the person who gets hurt most will be the one we're both trying to protect. As Sarah headed to her room, Marcus remained on the couch, staring at Emma's family project propped against the coffee table. 3 stick figures who looked so happy together, so complete. But Sarah was right. What they had was beautiful, but it was also precarious. Built on a contract instead of commitment, sustained by convenience as much as love. For the first time since making his unconventional offer, Marcus wondered if he'd been unfair to ask Sarah to give Emma her whole heart while expecting her to be satisfied with only a piece of a life in return. The letter was tucked between the pages of a photo album Sarah had been asked to dust. A simple task that had become something much more significant when the envelope fell out and landed at her feet. The handwriting was feminine and flowing, the paper cream-colored and expensive. Even before she saw the date, 3 months before Emma's birth, Sarah knew this was from Eleanor. She should have put it back immediately, should have respected Marcus's privacy and the sacred boundary between employee and employer. Instead, she found herself reading words that had been written by a woman who'd been pregnant with Emma, full of hopes for the future she'd never see. My dearest Marcus, the letter began, I know you think I'm being overly sentimental writing letters to you when you're just in the next room, but I want you to have something tangible when our daughter arrives. Something that captures how much I love you both, how perfect our life feels right now. Sarah's hands trembled as she continued reading. Elena wrote about her excitement for their daughter's arrival, about the nursery Marcus had insisted on, painting himself, about her hopes that their child would have Marcus's intelligence and determination, but also learn to balance ambition with joy. I see how hard you drive yourself, my love, Eleanor had written. How much pressure you put on yourself to be perfect, to provide everything we could ever need. But what I need most is just you, present, imperfect, human you. Our daughter will need that too. Success means nothing if you're not there to share it with the people you love. The letter went on to describe Elena's dreams for their family. Sunday mornings in bed with the baby between them, teaching their daughter to cook. Elena's mother's recipes, family vacations, where Marcus would actually disconnect from work. It was full of love and optimism and plans for a future that would never happen. Promise me something, the letter concluded. Promise me that no matter how successful you become, you'll remember that the most important thing you'll ever build is not a business empire, but a loving family. Promise me that our daughter will know every day how cherished she is. Promise me that if something happens to me, you won't shut down or shut people out. You have so much love to give, Marcus. Don't let fear stop you from giving it." Sarah was crying by the time she finished, overwhelmed by the tenderness in Elena's words and the tragedy of promises that had become impossible to keep. This letter explained so much about Marcus, his guilt, his emotional distance, his belief that providing financially was the same as providing love. "Sarah?" Marcus's voice from the doorway made her jump, and she realized with horror that she was holding his most private possession, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly, trying to fold the letter. "It fell out of the album when I was dusting, and I shouldn't have read it, I know, but it's okay," Marcus said quietly, though his face had gone pale. He entered the room slowly, as if approaching something fragile. "What did she say?" Sarah looked at him through her tears, this successful, powerful man who suddenly looked young and lost. "She loved you so much, and she was so excited about Emma, so hopeful about your future together." Marcus sat heavily in the armchair beside her, and Sarah saw something she'd never seen before. The grief he'd been carrying for 4 years, the weight of dreams deferred and promises he felt he'd broken. "I failed her," he said simply. "Everything she was worried about, everything she asked me to promise, I did the opposite. I threw myself into work. I shut everyone out. I let Emma grow up thinking she wasn't enough to keep her father home. You didn't fail her," Sarah said firmly. "You were grieving, Marcus. You were a new father who'd just lost the love of your life. You did the best you could." "Did I?" Marcus laughed bitterly. Elena wanted Emma to know how cherished she was. Instead, Emma spent 4 years asking why Daddy was always gone. Elena wanted me to remember that love was more important than success. Instead, I built an empire and forgot how to build relationships. Sarah set the letter gently on the table between them. "But you remembered eventually. Why do you think you made me that offer? Why do you think you went looking for someone to love Emma the way Elena wanted her to be loved?" Marcus looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his expression made Sarah's breath catch. "Because I finally realized that I couldn't do it alone, that Emma deserved better than a father who was always distracted, always somewhere else. That Elena was right. Success means nothing if you don't have people to share it with." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of Elena's words hanging between them. Sarah thought about the woman who'd written that letter, generous enough to want happiness for her husband and daughter, even if she couldn't be there to share it. "She would have loved you," Marcus said suddenly. "Elena always said the best mothers weren't necessarily the ones who gave birth, but the ones who chose to love unconditionally every single day. You think she'd be okay with—" Sarah gestured vaguely at herself, at the situation. "With this arrangement, I think she'd be grateful that Emma has someone who sings to her while making pancakes, who reads stories with different voices, who makes our house feel like the home Elena always wanted it to be." Marcus paused. "I think she'd be grateful that Emma has you." Something shifted in the air between them, a recognition of the intimacy they'd been building without acknowledging it. They weren't just employer and employee anymore, weren't just two people sharing the responsibility of raising Emma. They were partners in something deeper, something that felt dangerously close to "Mama Sarah! Daddy!" Emma's voice echoed through the house, followed by the sound of small feet running. "Come see what I made." They both rose quickly, the moment broken, but not forgotten. As they walked toward Emma's voice, Marcus touched Sarah's arm gently. "Thank you," he said, "for reading that letter, for understanding what it meant, for helping me remember what Elena wanted for our family." That evening, after Emma was in bed, Sarah found herself thinking about Elena's words as she prepared for her own bedtime. The letter had shown her a side of Marcus she'd only glimpsed. The man Eleanor had fallen in love with, capable of deep feeling and profound commitment. but it had also highlighted the impossibility of her own situation. Eleanor had been Marcus's wife, his chosen partner, the mother of his child. Sarah was an employee, however beloved, however integrated into their daily lives. The love she was developing for Emma was real and lasting, but what about the feelings she was beginning to have for Marcus? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Marcus stood in her doorway again, as he had several times over the past few weeks, drawn by some need for connection that seemed to surprise them both. "I wanted to give you this," he said, holding out the photograph that had been in the same album as the letter. It showed Eleanor holding a newborn Emma, both of them glowing with new life and love. "Elena always said that mothers should be honored, remembered. I thought maybe you'd like to put it in Emma's room so she can see all the women who've loved her." Sarah took the photograph with reverent hands, understanding the gift he was giving her. This wasn't just about Emma's heritage. It was about Marcus acknowledging Sarah's place in their family story. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll treasure this." As Marcus turned to leave, he paused at the doorway. "Sarah, that thing Elena wrote about not shutting people out when you're afraid. I've been thinking about that, about how fear can keep you from—" He stopped, shook his head. "Never mind, good night." "Marcus," the word stopped him. "Whatever it is you're afraid of, maybe it doesn't have to control what happens next." He looked at her for a long moment, and Sarah saw something vulnerable and hopeful in his eyes. "Maybe not," he said softly. "Maybe not." After he left, Sarah sat holding Eleanor's photograph, thinking about promises made and broken, about love that transcends circumstances, about the terrifying possibility that the arrangement she'd entered into might be transforming into something neither of them had planned for. In the morning, she would hang this picture in Emma's room, adding Elena to the gallery of love that surrounded the little girl. But tonight, she allowed herself to wonder what Elena would think about the growing connection between her widowed husband and the woman who'd agreed to love his daughter. Maybe, Sarah thought, Elena's greatest wish had been for her family to be happy and whole again, regardless of how that wholeness was achieved. Maybe love, in all its complicated, unexpected forms, was exactly what Elena had been hoping for when she'd written those words about not shutting people out. Maybe, for the first time since signing that contract, Sarah was beginning to believe that some business arrangements were really just love stories waiting for their authors to be brave enough to write the next chapter. The documents arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a courier who seemed apologetic about the gravity of what he was handing over. Marcus was already at the office, and Sarah was helping Emma with her breakfast when the doorbell rang. 20 minutes later, she sat at the kitchen counter staring at legal papers that felt like a death sentence to everything they'd built. "Petition for emergency custody modification," read the header, followed by language that made Sarah's stomach turn cold. The petitioner was someone named Richard Hawthorne, identified as Marcus's former business partner and Emma's legal guardian in the event of Marcus's incapacity. The allegations were devastating, that Marcus had created an inappropriate living arrangement that was detrimental to the minor child's welfare, that he had installed an unrelated woman in a pseudo-maternal role without proper legal safeguards, and that Emma was being exposed to an unstable and potentially harmful domestic situation. Sarah's hands shook as she read further. The petition detailed their arrangement with clinical precision. Sarah's live-in status, the financial compensation, the fact that Emma called her Mama despite having no legal relationship to the child. What had felt like love and family was being dissected and presented as something sordid and inappropriate. Emma, oblivious to the crisis unfolding, continued eating her cereal and chattering about the butterfly garden they'd planned for the weekend. "Sarah, Mama, can we plant the purple flowers today instead of Saturday? I think they need extra time to grow." "We'll see, sweetheart," Sarah managed, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. "Why don't you go get ready for school?" The moment Emma left the kitchen, Sarah called Marcus with trembling fingers. "Sarah, what's wrong?" His voice was immediately alert, responding to something in her tone. "Marcus, you need to come home. Now. Someone, your former partner, he's filed for custody of Emma." The silence on the other end was so complete that Sarah thought the call had dropped. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was deadly quiet. "Richard Hawthorne, what exactly does the petition say?" Sarah read the key passages, each word feeling like a stone in her mouth. She could hear Marcus breathing heavily on the other end, could practically feel his anger and panic through the phone. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't let Emma see those papers and don't talk to anyone about this until I get there." The next few hours passed in a blur of phone calls and tense conversations. Marcus arrived home pale and furious immediately, sequestering himself in his study with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in the rapid-fire tone he used for business crises. Sarah kept Emma occupied with crafts and stories, maintaining a facade of normalcy while her world crumbled around her. By afternoon, Marcus's lawyer had arrived, a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine Mills, who spread the custody documents across the dining room table like evidence at a crime scene. "This is bad," Catherine said without preamble. "Richard's been planning this for a while. He's got character witnesses, financial records, documentation of Emma's previous nannies who left. Abruptly, he's painting a picture of instability and poor judgment. What's his standing to challenge custody?" Sarah asked. Though she wasn't sure she had the right to be part of this conversation, Catherine looked at Marcus, who nodded. "Richard and I were partners for 10 years before we had a falling out 3 years ago. When Emma was born, Elena and I named him as guardian in our will, in case something happened to both of us. We never updated it after Elena died. So legally, he has grounds to challenge if he can prove Marcus is unfit?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "Unfortunately, yes. And he's arguing that this arrangement," Catherine gestured between Marcus and Sarah, "constitutes evidence of poor judgment and potential endangerment of the child." Sarah felt sick. Everything they'd built, everything Emma had blossomed into, was being twisted into something ugly and harmful. What does he really want? Marcus's laugh was bitter. "Money, control, revenge. When our partnership dissolved, Richard lost a significant amount of money. He's been looking for ways to get back at me ever since. And he's using Emma to do it," Catherine said grimly. "The petition requests that Emma be removed from the home immediately and placed with him pending a full custody evaluation. If he wins, he gets control of Emma's trust fund, her inheritance from Elena's estate, and probably the satisfaction of destroying my family in the process." Sarah's heart broke at the word family, spoken so naturally by Marcus, but potentially meaningless. "In the eyes of the law, what are our options?" Marcus asked. "We fight," Catherine said. "But Sarah, I need to be honest with you. Your presence in this household, while clearly beneficial to Emma, is going to be their strongest weapon against us. They'll argue that Marcus has chosen his romantic interests over his daughter's stability." "It's not romantic," Sarah protested. "This is a business arrangement. We have a contract." "Which makes it worse, not better," Catherine replied bluntly. "They'll say Marcus is so incapable of providing maternal care that he had to hire someone to do it. And the fact that you live here, that Emma calls you mother, that you're not licensed as a child care provider, it all plays into their narrative." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her presence, the thing that had brought joy and stability to Emma's life, was now the greatest threat to Emma's security. "What if I left?" Sarah heard herself say, though the words felt like they were being torn from her throat. "What if I moved out, went back to just being a daytime caregiver?" "Sarah, no," Marcus said immediately. "You're not the problem here." "Richard is," but Catherine was nodding slowly. "It might help. If we can show that Marcus has returned to a more traditional arrangement, that the living situation has been normalized." "Normalized?" Marcus's voice was rising. Sarah is Emma's mother in every way that matters. She's not going anywhere. Marcus, Sarah said quietly, if it helps Emma, it doesn't help Emma. Marcus slammed his hand on the table, making the legal documents jump. Emma needs stability, consistency. She needs the family we've built together. I won't tear apart her world, because Richard Hawthorne wants revenge. That evening, after Catherine had left with promises to begin building their defense, Sarah found Marcus standing in Emma's doorway, watching their daughter sleep. She looked so small in her princess bed, clutching her stuffed elephant, completely unaware that her world was about to be turned upside down. We have to tell her something, Sarah said softly. There's going to be a court hearing. Social workers, disruption to her routine. She needs to be prepared. Marcus's jaw was tight. How do you explain to a 4-year-old that someone wants to take her away from the only real family she's ever known? They stood in silence for a moment, both grappling with the impossibility of the situation. Finally, Sarah spoke. Marcus, I need you to really consider what Catherine said. If my being here is hurting Emma's case, don't. His voice was fierce. Don't you dare suggest leaving her. Emma loves you. You love her. That's not something to apologize for or hide from. But legally I should have married you 6 months ago and made this official, Marcus said, then stopped abruptly, as if shocked by his own words. Sarah stared at him. What? Marcus ran his hands through his hair, looking as surprised as she felt. I didn't mean to say that, but maybe that's not such a crazy idea. If we were married, Richard would have no grounds to challenge our family structure. Marcus, you can't be serious. Marriage to protect a custody arrangement? Is it crazier than paying someone to love my daughter? Is it crazier than what we already have? Marcus turned to face her fully. Sarah, what we have, it's not just an arrangement anymore. You know that, don't you? Sarah's heart was racing. Everything was happening too fast. The legal crisis mixing with personal revelations in a way that made clear thinking impossible. I need air, she said, pushing past him toward the balcony off the main hallway. Marcus followed her outside, where they stood under the stars that had witnessed so many of their late-night conversations. The night air was cool, but Sarah felt feverish with panic and possibility. I can't marry you to save a custody case, she said finally. That's not fair to any of us. What if it's not just about the custody case? Marcus's voice was quiet, invulnerable. What if I'm asking because somewhere along the way I stopped thinking of you as an employee and started thinking of you as... He stopped, shook his head. Never mind. This is all crazy. The pressure, the legal stuff, it's making me say things I shouldn't. But Sarah was thinking about Elena's letter, about the love she'd seen in Marcus's eyes when he watched her with Emma, about the way her heart leaped every time he came home. Was it possible that what she'd been telling herself was gratitude, was actually something deeper? What happens if we lose, she asked. What happens to Emma if Richard gets custody? Marcus's face went dark. Emma goes to live with a man who sees her as a paycheck and a weapon. She loses everything we've built. Here, everyone she loves. She becomes a pawn in someone else's game. The weight of it settled over Sarah like a shroud. Emma, bright, trusting, loving Emma, ripped away from the only stable home she'd ever known and placed with someone who wanted to use her to hurt Marcus. I won't let that happen, Sarah said firmly. Whatever it takes, whatever we have to do. I won't let anyone hurt that little girl. Marcus looked at her with something that might have been hope. Does that mean you'll consider... I'll consider everything, Sarah said, though her heart was hammering so hard she could barely think. But Marcus, if we do this, if we take this step, it has to be real. Emma's too smart, too perceptive. She'll know if we're just pretending. Who says we'd be pretending? Marcus asked quietly. The question hung in the night air between them, full of possibility and terror, and the recognition that their carefully maintained boundaries had already been crossed long ago. Tomorrow, they would begin the fight for Emma's future. But tonight, they were finally acknowledging that somewhere, Along the way, their business arrangement had become something else entirely, something worth fighting for, something worth risking everything to protect. The ring had been Elena's, a simple platinum band with a single diamond that caught the morning light as Marcus turned it over in his palm. He'd kept it in his desk drawer for 4 years, unable to wear it, unable to put it away. Now, as he prepared for the most important conversation of his life, it felt like a bridge between his past and his uncertain future. Sarah was in the kitchen with Emma, their voices mixing in the comfortable rhythm that had become the soundtrack of his mornings. In 3 days, they would face Richard Hawthorne in court. In 3 days, a judge would decide whether the family they'd built was worth preserving or if Emma would be ripped away from everything she'd ever known. But first, Marcus needed to have a conversation that would change everything. Again. "Emma, sweetheart," Sarah was saying as Marcus entered the kitchen. "Remember we talked about how sometimes grown-ups have to go to important meetings? Well, Daddy and I have one today." Emma looked up from her cereal with the serious expression she wore when she knew adults were worried about something. At 4, she was remarkably perceptive about emotional undercurrents, a skill born from too many upheavals in her young life. "Is it about the mean man who wants to take me away?" she asked matter-of-factly. Marcus felt his heart stop. "Emma, who told you about—" "I heard you and Sarah Mama talking," Emma said, completely unperturbed. "You think I don't listen, but I do. The mean man thinks I shouldn't live with you and Sarah Mama anymore." Sarah knelt beside Emma's chair, her face gentle but serious. "Sweetheart, what do you understand about what's happening?" Emma considered the question with 4-year-old gravity. "Someone thinks our family is wrong because Sarah Mama isn't my born mama. But that's silly because love doesn't come from being born. It comes from choosing to stay." The wisdom in her simple words made Marcus's throat tight. "That's exactly right, baby girl, and we're going to talk to a judge and explain that our family is perfect just the way it is." "Will the judge listen?" Emma asked. "I hope so," Marcus said honestly. "But Emma, no matter what happens, Sarah and I will always make sure you're safe and loved." After they dropped Emma at school, with extra hugs and promises to pick her up on time, Marcus and Sarah drove to Catherine Mill's law office in tense silence. The weight of impending decisions pressed down on them, heavy as storm clouds. Catherine's conference room was filled with documents, character references and photographs, evidence of the life they'd built together. Marcus stared at a picture of Emma's recent birthday party, all 3 of them laughing as Emma blew out her candles, and realized how much they looked like a real family, how much they felt like one. "The social worker's report came back," Catherine announced without preamble. "It's mixed. She was clearly impressed with Emma's adjustment, her happiness, her development, but she expressed concerns about the unconventional nature of your arrangement and the potential for instability." "What kind of concerns?" Sarah asked. "Questions about your long-term commitment to the family, the implications of the financial arrangement, the lack of legal protections for Emma if the relationship dissolves." Catherine spread the report across the table. "She recommends supervised visitation with Richard, but suggests that the current living arrangement needs clarification and stabilization." Marcus felt anger rising in his chest. Clarification? Emma is thriving. She's happy, secure, loved. What more clarification do they need? "They need to know this is permanent," Catherine said bluntly. "They need to know that Sarah isn't going to disappear from Emma's life the moment something better comes along, and frankly, so do I." Sarah flinched as if she'd been slapped. "I would never abandon Emma." "I believe you," Catherine said gently. "But the court needs more than your word. They need legal commitment, permanent ties, something that proves Emma's emotional investment in you is safe." The implication hung heavy in the air between them. Marriage, the solution Marcus had blurted out in panic 3 nights ago, was beginning to feel less like a desperate measure and more like the only way forward. "We need to discuss this privately," Marcus said. "Finally. Give us an hour. After Catherine left them alone in the conference room, Marcus and Sarah sat across from each other at the polished table, the weight of 4 years of grief and 3 months of unexpected love pressing down on them. "This is insane," Sarah said, finally. "We're talking about getting married to win a custody case." "Are we?" Marcus asked quietly. "Because when I think about losing you, losing what we have, it's not just about Emma anymore, Sarah. It's about losing you." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Marcus, don't say things like that because you're scared. Don't make this about us, when it needs to be about Emma. What if it's about all of us?" Marcus pulled Elena's ring from his pocket, setting it gently on the table between them. What if somewhere along the way, this stopped being about an arrangement and started being about a family? Sarah stared at the ring, her breathing shallow. "That's Elena's." "Yes, and I think she'd want it to represent love again, instead of just grief." Marcus reached across the table but didn't touch her, didn't pressure her. "Sarah, I'm not asking you to marry me just for Emma. I'm asking because you've brought light back into my life in ways I'd forgotten were possible. I'm asking because I love you." The words hung in the air between them, massive and transformative. Sarah's tears spilled over, and she covered her face with her hands. "You don't love me," she said through her fingers. "You're grateful to me. You appreciate what I do for Emma, but love, real love, that takes time to build. That takes—" "How much time?" Marcus interrupted gently. "How much time does it take to fall in love with someone who makes your daughter laugh every day? Who fills your house with music and warmth? Who looks at you like you're worth coming home to?" Sarah lowered her hands, and Marcus saw vulnerability and hope warring in her expression. "What about Elena? What about the life you had with her?" "Elena's gone," Marcus said simply, "and she loved me enough to want me to be happy again. She wrote in that letter that she didn't want me to shut people out. Remember? She wanted Emma to have a loving family, whatever that looked like." They sat in silence for a moment, both staring at Elena's ring. Finally, Sarah spoke. "If we do this, if we get married, it changes everything. There's no going back to the arrangement, no safety net. We'd be choosing each other for real." "Yes," Marcus said, "we would be. And if it doesn't work, if we realize we made a mistake, then we figure it out together, as a family, the same way any married couple does." Marcus finally reached across the table and took her hand. "Sarah, I can't promise you a fairy tale. I can't promise we won't have difficulties, or that I won't sometimes work too much, or that this won't be the most unconventional love story ever told. But I can promise you that Emma will always be safe and loved, and that I will spend every day trying to be worthy of the gift you've given us." Sarah's fingers tightened around his. "I need you to understand something. I'm not just agreeing to this for Emma either. I'm agreeing because somewhere along the way, I fell in love with both of you, with the family we've become, with the man you are when you're not hiding behind work and guilt." Marcus felt something ease in his chest, a tension he'd been carrying for so long he'd forgotten it was there. "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes to fighting for Emma together. It's a yes to seeing what we can build if we're brave enough to try." Sarah looked at Elena's ring, then back at Marcus. "It's a yes to love, even if it's not the way either of us expected to find it." That evening, they sat Emma down for the most important conversation of her young life. She listened with grave attention as they explained that they were going to get married, that Sarah would become her real mama in every way, that their family would be official and permanent. "Will you change your name to Emma Wellington Chen?" she asked Sarah with 4-year-old logic. "Actually," Sarah said, smiling through her tears, "I think I'll change my name to Sarah Wellington. And you'll be Emma Wellington, just like always." Emma considered this seriously. "And we'll still have Sunday pancakes?" "Every Sunday," Marcus promised. "And Sarah Mama will still sing when she cooks?" "Every day," Sarah said. Emma nodded decisively. "Then it's perfect. When can we have the wedding?" The adults exchanged glances. "Soon, sweetheart," Marcus said. "Very soon." Later that night, after Emma was asleep and the ring was on Sarah's finger. A perfect fit, as if it had been waiting for her all along. They sat on the couch planning a future that felt both terrifying and inevitable. "We should call Catherine in the morning," Sarah said, admiring the way the diamond caught the lamplight. "Let her know the family situation has been clarified and stabilized." Marcus laughed, pulling her closer. "I love how you make it sound like a business transaction, isn't it?" Sarah teased. "I'm getting a husband, a daughter, and a mansion. You're getting a wife, a mother for Emma, and someone to make your house feel like a home. Sounds like a pretty good deal to me." But as Marcus kissed her, soft and tender and full of promise, they both knew this was about much more than any deal they could have negotiated. This was about love finding a way, even in the most unexpected circumstances. This was about a family that had grown from the most unlikely beginnings into something worth fighting for. Tomorrow, they would face Richard Hawthorne in court. Tomorrow, they would fight for the right to stay together as a family. But tonight, they were already home. The courthouse smelled like old wood and nervous sweat, its marble floors echoing with the footsteps of people whose lives hung in the balance. Sarah sat in the front row behind the defendant's table, her hands folded tightly in her lap, Elena's engagement ring catching the harsh fluorescent light. Beside her, Marcus looked pale but determined in his best suit, while Catherine Mills shuffled through documents with practiced efficiency. Across the aisle, Richard Hawthorne sat with his attorney, a sharp-faced woman who kept glancing their way with calculating eyes. Richard himself was younger than Sarah had expected, maybe 40, with the kind of aggressive confidence that came from always getting what he wanted. When he looked at Emma, who sat between Sarah and Marcus, there was no warmth in his expression, only the cold assessment of an asset to be acquired. "All rise," the bailiff announced. "The Honorable Judge Patricia Reeves presiding." Judge Reeves was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and kind but piercing eyes. Sarah felt a flutter of hope. Surely a woman would understand the bonds that had formed between her and Emma, would see past the unconventional circumstances to the love that was clearly there. "This is a petition for emergency custody modification," Judge Reeves began, settling her reading glasses on her nose. "Mr. Hawthorne, as the petitioner, you may present your case first." Richard's attorney, Ms. Bradley, rose with theatrical precision. "Your Honor, we are here today because a precious child has been placed in an unstable and inappropriate situation by a father whose judgment has been clouded by his own needs rather than his daughter's welfare." Sarah felt Marcus tense beside her as the attorney painted their life in the darkest possible terms, describing Sarah as a financially motivated caregiver, their arrangement as pseudo-matrimonial cohabitation, and Emma's attachment as manufactured dependency on an unrelated adult with no legal standing. "Mr. Wellington has created a situation where his daughter calls a paid employee mother," Ms. Bradley continued, "where she has been led to believe she has a family unit that could dissolve at any time, leaving her devastated and abandoned. This is not stability, Your Honor. This is emotional manipulation." Sarah's chest burned with anger and hurt. Every loving moment, every bedtime story, every scraped knee kissed better, all of it reduced to manipulation and financial transaction. "Furthermore," Ms. Bradley said, "just 3 days ago, Mr. Wellington announced his intention to marry this woman, conveniently. Timed to coincide with this custody proceeding. This sudden engagement appears to be nothing more than a desperate attempt to legitimize an arrangement that was inappropriate from its inception." Judge Reeves looked directly at Marcus and Sarah. "Is this true? You announced your engagement 3 days ago?" Catherine stood. "Your Honor, while the timing might appear convenient, the relationship between my client and Ms. Chen has been developing naturally over the course of their shared commitment to Emma's welfare. Their decision to marry is based on genuine affection and the desire to provide Emma with permanent stability. Permanent stability, Ms. Bradley scoffed. Your Honor, this entire arrangement has been transactional from the beginning. Ms. Chen was hired specifically to provide maternal care in exchange for housing and a substantial salary. Now facing legal challenges, they've decided to make their business arrangement official through marriage. This is not love. This is damage control. Sarah felt every word like a physical blow. The attorney was taking their beautiful, complicated love story and twisting it into something sordid and calculating. Across the courtroom, she caught sight of some of the mothers from Emma's school who'd come as character witnesses for Richard. Their expressions ranged from sympathetic to judgmental, and Sarah realized that no matter the outcome today, she would always be the woman who'd been paid to love someone else's child. Mr. Hawthorne, Judge Reeves said, please tell the court why you believe Emma would be better served in your care. Richard stood, his voice carefully modulated for maximum sympathy. Your Honor, I've known Emma since she was born. I was Marcus's business partner and close friend, chosen by him and his late wife Elena to be Emma's guardian, should anything happen to them. I offer Emma a stable, traditional family environment with my wife and our 2 children. He gestured toward a woman in the gallery, presumably his wife, who smiled warmly at the judge. Emma would have siblings, a mother figure who is committed to the family by choice rather than compensation, and the security of knowing that her place in our family is permanent and unconditional. Sarah's heart sank as she watched Judge Reeves taking notes. On paper, Richard's argument made perfect sense. What child wouldn't be better off with a traditional family rather than the confusing arrangement they'd created? However, Richard continued, my primary concern is not just Emma's living situation, but the psychological damage that may have already been done by allowing her to form such a strong attachment to someone who could leave at any time. Ms. Chen has no legal obligation to Emma. If her relationship with Mr. Wellington fails, if better opportunities arise elsewhere, Emma will be abandoned by yet another maternal figure. The words hit Sarah like physical blows. This was her greatest fear, spoken aloud in a courtroom, that she would somehow hurt Emma by loving her, that their unconventional beginning would lead to inevitable devastation. Your Honor, Richard said, his voice growing stronger, I'm not here to punish Marcus for his grief-driven poor judgment. I'm here to protect a child who has already lost one mother and deserves better than to lose another when this arrangement inevitably fails. As Richard sat down, the courtroom fell silent except for the soft scratch of Judge Reeves's pen and Emma's quiet voice as she whispered something to the small elephant toy she'd brought for comfort. Sarah looked at this little girl who'd become her whole world, who trusted so completely in the family they'd built together, and felt the weight of every decision that had brought them to this moment. In less than an hour, she would have to take the stand and explain how she'd fallen in love with a child who wasn't her own, how a business arrangement had become a family, how love could grow from the most unlikely circumstances. But first, she had to listen to more testimony about why that love wasn't enough, why it wasn't real, why it couldn't possibly be what Emma needed most. The irony was devastating. They were fighting for the right to stay together as a family, but the very act of fighting was being used as evidence that they weren't a family at all. The judge's gavel lay on the bench like a sword of Damocles, its weight seeming to press down on everyone in the courtroom. Sarah had just finished her testimony, her voice steady despite the tears that had threatened throughout. She'd spoken about Emma's transformation, about their daily routines, about the love that had grown between them despite, or perhaps because of, their unconventional beginning. Now it was Marcus's turn, and as he approached the witness stand, Sarah saw something different in his posture. The careful control he usually maintained was gone, replaced by raw determination and something that looked like peace. Mr. Wellington, Catherine began, please tell the court about your relationship with Ms. Chen. Marcus looked directly at the judge, his voice clear and unwavering. Your Honor, 6 months ago I hired Sarah Chen to care for my daughter because I was failing her. I was so focused on providing financial security that I'd forgotten to provide love, presence, the things that actually matter. Judge Reeves leaned forward slightly. And now? Now I realize that Sarah didn't just save Emma. She saved me too. Marcus's eyes found Sarah's across the courtroom. I fell in love with her, not because she could care for my daughter, but because of who she is. Because she fills our house with music and laughter. Because she sees the best in people, even when they can't see it in themselves. Because she loved Emma when she had no obligation to do so, and she loved me when I'd forgotten how to love myself. Mr. Wellington, Miss Bradley interrupted, isn't it true that your feelings for Ms. Chen developed only after she proved useful as a caregiver? Marcus turned to face her directly. Miss Bradley, I've built a successful business by recognizing a value when I see it. What I recognized in Sarah wasn't just her usefulness, it was her heart, her capacity for love, her ability to turn a house into a home. His voice grew stronger. Yes, I hired her to care for Emma, but I'm marrying her because I can't imagine my life without her. Sarah felt her breath catch. This wasn't just testimony, this was a declaration, spoken in front of a room full of people who'd questioned their love. Judge Reeves looked at Marcus thoughtfully. Mr. Wellington, what happens if your marriage to Ms. Chen doesn't work out? What protection does Emma have then? The same protection any child has when their parents love them unconditionally, Marcus replied. Emma isn't just Sarah's responsibility now, she's her daughter. That doesn't end with divorce papers. Your Honor, that's permanent, but she has no legal obligation, Miss Bradley began. She has something stronger than legal obligation, Marcus interrupted. She has love, she has commitment. She has 4 months of proof that Emma is her priority, her joy, her child in every way that matters. Judge Reeves turned her attention to the gallery. I'd like to hear from Emma's teacher, Mrs. Patterson. A middle-aged woman rose from the back of the courtroom, walking forward with quiet dignity. Your Honor, I've been teaching for 23 years. I've seen children in every kind of family situation imaginable. Emma Wellington is one of the happiest, most secure children I've ever had in my classroom. She glanced at Sarah with unmistakable warmth. When she talks about her Sarah mama, her face lights up. She draws pictures of their cooking adventures, writes about their weekend plans in her journal, brings Sarah's old recipe book for show and tell, because she's so proud of being part of Sarah's family traditions. Mrs. Patterson turned back to the judge. Your Honor, I've also seen what happens when children are moved from loving homes to more appropriate situations. The damage can be irreversible. This child has found her family. To take that away, because it looks different from what we expect, would be a tragedy. Judge Reeves made notes, then looked up. I'd like to speak with Emma, privately. Sarah's heart stopped. This was the moment she'd been dreading, Emma alone with a stranger, being asked to choose between the family she'd found and the family others thought she should have. It's okay, Marcus whispered as they watched Emma being led to the judge's chambers. She knows who she belongs with. The 15 minutes that followed felt like hours. Sarah watched the clock, imagining every possible question the judge might ask, every way Emma might misunderstand or feel pressured. Finally, the chamber door opened, and Emma emerged holding the judge's hand, chattering animatedly about something that had clearly delighted her. Judge Reeves resumed her position with Emma, settling back between Marcus and Sarah. Immediately, reaching for Sarah's hand, this court has heard compelling arguments from both sides, Judge Reeves began, her voice measured and thoughtful. Mr. Hawthorne, your concerns about stability and traditional family structures are not unfounded. You offer Emma a conventional family environment that many would consider ideal. Sarah felt her stomach drop. This sounded like the prelude to losing everything. However, the judge continued, after speaking with Emma, reviewing the social worker's report, and hearing testimony today, several things have become clear. First, this child has formed a genuine, healthy attachment to Ms. Chen that extends far beyond the original arrangement. Second, Emma's development, happiness, and security have flourished under their care. Third, and most importantly, Emma herself has expressed, with the clarity that only children possess, exactly where she belongs. Judge Reeves picked up her gavel, its weight seeming to balance the future in her hands. Emma told me that families aren't about having the same blood. They're about having the same love. She said that Sarah Mama chose to stay when she could have left, chose to love when she could have just done her job. She said their house feels happy now because everyone in it wants to be there. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as the judge continued. The court finds that Emma's current living situation, while unconventional, serves her best interests. The petition for custody modification is denied. Furthermore, I'm ordering that Mr. Hawthorne's visitation rights be limited to supervised visits, as his motives appear to be more focused on financial gain than Emma's welfare. The gavel came down with a sound like thunder, final and absolute. Around them, the courtroom erupted, Catherine gathering papers with satisfied efficiency, Richard and his lawyer speaking in heated whispers, the mothers from Emma's school looking surprised and perhaps a little ashamed of their earlier judgments. But Sarah heard none of it. She was focused entirely on Emma, who had turned to her with a smile so bright it could have powered the entire courthouse. "We won, Sarah Mama," Emma said, throwing her arms around Sarah's neck. "The judge says I get to stay with my real family." Over Emma's head, Sarah met Marcus's eyes. He was crying too, she realized, tears of relief and joy and love that no contract could have ever guaranteed. "We won," Sarah whispered back to Emma, holding her close and knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. As a family, the kind that wasn't made by chance or biology or conventional wisdom, but by choice and commitment and love, strong enough to weather any storm. The judge's gavel had spoken. Their family was real, legal, and forever. The photographer's studio was filled with warm, golden light that seemed to wrap around them like a blessing. Marcus adjusted his tie for the third time, nervous in a way he hadn't been since his first business presentation 20 years ago. Beside him, Sarah smoothed Emma's flower girl dress, the same shade of pink as the butterflies on her bedroom mobile, while Emma practiced her most serious expression for the camera. "I think we need one more with everyone laughing," the photographer suggested, and Emma immediately dissolved into giggles, setting off a chain reaction that had all three of them doubled over with mirth. When the photographer finally captured the shot, Marcus knew it would be perfect, not because they looked polished or professional, but because they looked genuinely happy. Like a family that had grown into love rather than fallen into it, a family that had chosen each other over and over again. 1 year had passed since that terrifying day in court, and everything had changed. The formal contract that had once defined their relationship now sat in a filing cabinet, replaced by marriage certificate and adoption papers that made their bonds legal as well as emotional. Sarah was officially Emma's adoptive mother, her name added to birth certificates and school records and medical forms, the bureaucratic acknowledgement of what had been true in their hearts for months. The wedding itself had been small but perfect, held in the garden behind their house, where Emma had helped Sarah plant the butterfly flowers she'd dreamed of so long ago. Emma had been the flower girl, of course, scattering petals with such enthusiasm that she'd ended up covered in them herself, giggling as Marcus had carried her down the aisle alongside Sarah. "Mrs. Wellington," Marcus had whispered as they'd exchanged rings, and Sarah had laughed through her tears at how strange and wonderful it sounded. "Mr. Wellington," she'd whispered back, "I love you too." Elena's ring fit Sarah's finger as if it had been made for her, but beside it now sat a wedding band Marcus had chosen specifically for their new beginning, engraved with the date they'd met, and a line from Emma's favorite bedtime story, "Love is choosing to stay." Now, as they posed for their first official family portrait, Marcus marveled at how naturally they fit together. Sarah's hand rested on Emma's shoulder with casual affection. Emma leaned against him with complete trust, and he had his arm around both of them, his wife and his daughter. The two people who had taught him that love was not a finite resource, but something that multiplied when shared. "One more," the photographer said. "But this time, everyone look at each other instead of at me." Marcus turned to Sarah, saw the contentment in her eyes, the way she looked at him like he was someone worth coming home to. When she smiled, he remembered every reason he'd fallen in love with her, not just her capacity to love Emma, but her ability to bring joy into the ordinary moments of life. Sarah looked down at Emma, this little girl who had changed everything, who had brought them together and given them a reason to become a family. Emma gazed up at both of them with the secure confidence of a child who knew she was cherished, who had never doubted for a moment that love was stronger than any legal document or social convention. "Beautiful," the photographer murmured. And Marcus knew he was right. They were beautiful, not because they looked perfect, but because they belonged to each other completely. Later, as they walked through the park near their home, Emma ran ahead to chase butterflies, while Marcus and Sarah followed hand in hand, the comfortable silence of people who no longer had to prove anything to anyone. "Do you ever think about how it all started?" Sarah asked, watching Emma's delighted pursuit of a particularly cooperative monarch. "About the contract, the arrangement, how clinical it all seemed." Marcus squeezed her hand. "Sometimes. But then, I think about Elena's letter, about how she said love was about choosing to show up every day. Maybe we were just doing that from the beginning. We just didn't recognize it as love yet." "Emma did," Sarah said with a smile. "She knew before we did that we were meant to be a family." They sat on a park bench while Emma played on the swings, her laughter carrying across the playground like music. Marcus watched his daughter, their daughter, and felt the deep contentment that came from knowing she was safe, loved, secure, in ways that had nothing to do with money or success. "Marcus," Sarah said quietly, "I need to tell you something." Something in her tone made him turn to look at her more closely. She was smiling, but there were tears in her eyes, happy tears, he realized with relief. "What is it?" Sarah took his hand and placed it gently on her still flat stomach. "Emma's going to be a big sister." The words took a moment to penetrate. And when they did, Marcus felt his world tilt on its axis in the most wonderful way. We're having a baby," Sarah confirmed, laughing at his expression. "I found out yesterday. I wanted to wait until after the photo session to tell you, but I couldn't keep it to myself any longer." Marcus pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the joy and gratitude and love that had been building in his chest for months. Their family, which had started as a business arrangement, was about to grow again, not from necessity or transaction, but from pure love. "Emma!" Marcus called, unable to contain his excitement. "Come here, sweetheart. We have something to tell you." Emma ran over, her cheeks flushed from playing, her butterfly dress grass-stained and perfect. "What is it, Daddy?" Sarah knelt to Emma's level, her hands gentle on the little girl's shoulders. "How would you feel about being a big sister?" Emma's eyes went wide with wonder. "Really? You have a baby in your tummy like Mrs. Patterson did?" "Really," Sarah confirmed. "What do you think about that?" Emma considered this with her usual seriousness, then broke into the brightest smile Marcus had ever seen. "I think it's perfect. I can teach the baby about butterflies and pancakes and how to make—" Sarah Mama laugh. As Emma chatted excitedly about all the things she would teach her new sibling, Marcus looked at Sarah with wonder. Their family, which had begun with a contract and a desperate hope for stability, had become something neither of them could have imagined, a love story that transcended its unconventional beginning, a home built on choice rather than chance. That evening, as they tucked Emma into bed with extra stories and kisses to celebrate the baby news, Marcus stood in the doorway, watching Sarah braid Emma's hair for tomorrow's school day. On the wall, hung their new family portrait alongside Emma's old drawing of three stick figures, past and present, dreams and reality, all testament to the truth that families could be made in the most unexpected ways. "Sarah, Mama," Emma said sleepily, "will you still sing the cooking songs when the baby comes?" "Every day," Sarah promised, kissing Emma's forehead. "And I'll teach the baby all the songs too, so our whole family can sing together." "Good," Emma murmured, drifting towards sleep. "Because that's what families do. They choose to stay, and they sing together, and they love each other no matter what." From the mouths of babes, Marcus thought, turning off the light and following his wife down the hallway toward their own room. Their extraordinary, impossible, beautiful family, built on the radical notion that love was stronger than convention, deeper than law, more enduring than any contract ever written. Outside their window, the butterfly garden Sarah and Emma had planted together bloomed in the moonlight, a symbol of transformation and beauty, emerging from the most unlikely beginnings, just like their love, just like their family, just like the future they